Hello and welcome. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world right now. And welcome to our webinar, Data Protection Trends, What to Expect in 2023. We're excited to have you here and that you want to learn more about the latest data protection trends. Before we get started though, I have a few things to talk about with you about GoToWebinar, just some housekeeping items. Where you see that little A, that's where you can ask your questions during the webinar. And we'll either answer them directly, or at the end, we also have a little bit time for a Q&A session. Or worst case, if we're running out of time, we will definitely follow up on your questions and reach out to you after the webinar. Since this is a little bit more interactive this time, you can also use the question section to submit your thoughts and your feedback and your comments on the trends topics that we are talking today. And then where you see the little B, that's where you find our handouts, and we uploaded a compliance checklist for you today that you can download without submitting a form or anything and use as useful information. And then, of course, we will send the recording of the webinar. Give us a couple of days after the webinar. So if you want to listen to it again, we'll send that out to you, and then you can listen to it or watch it at any time later as well. And then very important, if you can't hear me, well, you can't hear me, but I hope that you at least see that I'm wiggling with the mouse here and I'm pointing on the troubleshooting tool that GoToWebinar put together. That's where you can see some tips on, do you have the correct speaker selected? Is your audio turned on? Those type of things. And then just so you know who is going to talk with you about the data protection trends today. So I'm accompanied by Mike Andrews, who is the CEO of NovaBACKUP, and his passion is working with managed service providers and helping them launch successful backup as a service businesses. Then we have Nate, who actually started working at a managed service provider where he was responsible for the data protection solutions. But now with NovaBACKUP, he's responsible for our support and our product development. And then myself, I'm Josephine, I'm the Director of Product Marketing. And well, I'm responsible for the marketing here at NovaBACKUP. And today we're going to talk a little bit about the trends that we see in the data protection area. Our focus is mostly on what we hear from our customers and partners, but I also wanted to briefly talk a little bit about the trends that we see in the news. And as I said before, we are trying to keep this presentation interactive, so we prepared a couple of polls, but also feel free to use the question section to submit your thoughts, your comments, and your questions, of course. So starting with just data protection trends that we see in the news. And if you've read any news, you've probably seen something around data growing, digital data growing, the data that we are creating is growing. There are stats running around like 90% of all data has been created in the last two to 3 years, and that growth is not stopping. The good thing is that IT departments and IT experts, they are adjusting their budgets, and you can tell me in the question section if that's the case for you or not. But what we see globally is a general increase in spending, and that especially when it comes to cloud initiatives. And when I'm talking cloud or mentioning cloud apps here, I'm talking not just public cloud applications, but also private cloud or hybrid cloud projects. And the good thing is that not just the spending is increasing, but also the projects themselves, the number of projects themselves. And no matter what kind of buzzword you want to put towards that, like digital transformation or software as a service, whatever buzzword you like, what they all do is they all say the same thing at the end, that it means more data, aka more to do for IT departments and for IT experts. But cloud or not cloud, more data generally also means more cyber attacks, more ransomware attacks. Well, no wonder with all that information flying around, which is not great, but at least in the past that we've seen that cyber insurance companies simply paid the ransom, but that's not longer the case anymore. We're actually hearing from our customers about insurance companies that are asking now for reports and risk assessment, and we'll talk about that in a little bit more in just a little bit. And it's not just the evidence that they're asking for, but they're also increasing the insurance premiums. They are going up as well. Interestingly enough, Nate actually just pointed out an article to me where it said that more and more ransom victims are refusing to pay the ransom. So in Q1 2019, that article said it was 85%, and in Q4 2022, it's only 37%. So ransomware is not that lucrative anymore, which leads ransomware operators to ask now for larger sums, or they are repeatedly attacking the same companies. So it never gets boring in that area. And what ransomware is definitely driving is that increase in insurance premiums, but also the legal regulations. They are renewed, they're being extended, and that on a continuous basis. And that actually brings us to the first topic, compliance, that we'd like to go into a bit more detail about. So what we've seen in 2023 is that we have a lot more GDPR-like regulations, if you're familiar with the data protection regulations from Europe. But it's not just in Europe, it's worldwide. Like Europe continues to strengthen their regulations, but we've seen countries like Canada, Quebec took, copied basically the GDPR as law 25. We're seeing multiple US states that are coming up this year with new regulation. California already had one, but they are enhancing their Protection Act now. We see Utah coming out with new regulations related to privacy, Virginia, and then there were a couple of others as well. And even companies are updating their data protection agreements. Microsoft, as a big example, just published a new version where they're covering the data that is stored using their Microsoft 365 applications. So it's never really boring in that field. And that's kind of where I wanted to hand the first question to Mike and Nate, because we're seeing these compliance requirements, we're seeing those regulations tightening, not only from a legislative perspective, but also from an insurance perspective. So what are insurances and companies require now? That's kind of the big question. And actually, before I let you dive into this question, I would like to hear from our audience, and I have prepared a poll here talking about insurances. I would be interested to hear from you attending here. Does your insurance actually cover cyber attacks? Yes, no, or I actually don't know. I would be interested to see that, because what we are reading in the news and in various studies is that companies do technically have a cyber insurance, but not all are aware of what the requirements are when it comes to data protection. So I'm interested to see here if you have a cyber insurance, or if you actually don't know if you have one. So I see the polls coming in. Mike and Nate, you can get ready because as soon as the poll is over, I will hand it over to you so you can share your expertise here a little bit more. Perfect, I see the votes coming in. Okay, I'm closing it now. And it's exciting to see that we have 50% of you attending here do have a cyber insurance, or that their insurance covers cyber attacks, and only 29% actually don't know. So that is a pretty good ratio, I'd say. I don't know, Nate, what do you think?
Yeah, it's interesting because what we're seeing, like from some of our MSP partners and other partners, is their insurance companies are coming back to them, after, say, like a ransomware event, or even like a lot of times on renewals of their insurance, yearly insurance, and asking some interesting questions. I mean, even just this week, I had a MSP partner ask for some documentation on, some encryption and some other stuff. They're using our software to do the backup, but their insurance company was asking some actually pretty technical questions about how their encryption is working and that type of thing. And they needed this even to renew their cyber insurance, well, their normal insurance and their cyber insurance rider for the year. So it's interesting that we're seeing that the insurance company is, making sure all of this is there. The reason they're making sure it's there is because they don't want to pay out, ransomware and other fees, that type of thing.
Yeah.
So
Basically, what you're stating is they don't want to make a bad bet on something,
yeah,
you know, and the qualifying. Well, I'm seeing the same thing too. Is the qualifying for coverage is becoming much more difficult as the industry matures and they learn more from their previous mistakes. You know, gone are the days like where in the past we've had, and you'll recall we have a few customers who have had incidents years ago, and they had pretty much an open cyber insurance policy that pretty much just paid hundreds of thousands of dollars out. And when we sat back, we looked and thought, these companies didn't even really do the right things to prepare, but the insurance company had no way to determine that, so they just had to pay the bills. And now I'm starting to see trends where even I was on Traveler's site a little while ago where they have cyber insurance and they actually hire a third party. They call it a free service where that third party actually interviews you and gets you prepared. You have to jump through a lot of hoops, and of course that third party also sells their services and consulting to help you get prepared. But if you don't follow their guidelines, then they actually have an out, like you're saying. They don't want to pay if they don't have to.
I mean that's how the insurance companies make their money, is not paying out the stuff. Yeah, so of course.
Well, definitely. We live in California. You're talking earthquakes and fire insurance, you know, and then, you know, those premiums are, one, they separate it from the standard insurance policies that you can get for your homes, and also they're very expensive, and they don't even cover for everything. They'll cover just the structure of your home, but if you have a swimming pool and it gets cracked, well, that's on you. You know, so yeah, I see this going in the same direction as well.
Well, just like that, so in some cases out here in California, if you're in a what is it, a high threatened fire place or whatever they're calling it, basically a high probability of getting a fire, they won't even insure you. And we're
Yeah.
seeing this with some of our with some MSPs too and other partners where they've had so many
Tax.
you know,
Yeah.
claims and stuff like that they're getting dropped by their insurance.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. When the payouts happen, the service stops. So and that also ties into like the fact that if you don't have a backup and recovery plan, then you basically don't get insurance either.
Well, and you have to be able to prove that plan is what we're seeing too. They're asking for documentation and the fact that you have been practicing that plan, not just written down, that you actually have logs and audit logs that, hey, I am doing my backups, I am testing restores, here's where the data resides and how everything is set up. So it's not just saying, oh yeah, I do have a plan. It's the fact that you have to prove that you've been doing that plan too.
Yeah, and I would also think, I mean, Josephine started talking about compliance earlier, and you know, I only see this getting, we're going to see a lot more and more compliance requirements, and they're going to be tied into insurance as well. I mean, as long as there's a need for data security and there's personal information out there, there's going to be more compliance rules completed. And you can even see, like, if in government, they have NIST,
Yep.
the NIST coverage, which that is being replaced in a way by CMMC, which 2.0, which is coming around. And so even as Josephine said earlier too, that existing compliances are just getting tougher, and once again, insurance companies are going to be tying into that as well.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about the new CMC or CMMC 2.0 that I think it goes into effect in March or something like that.
Yeah.
They're straight up requiring that the companies prove that the data security practices are there through outside assessment processes. So yeah, they're going to start hitting. Well, they're already starting to hit hard on this.
Yeah, yeah, and it seems every time we get a phone call from a customer, it seems like there's a new rule or compliance being presented to us that we don't even know. It's very hard to stay on top of these things, you know. And I'm even seeing the trends are that in many cases compliance doesn't even apply to a customer's industry, but they're using these standards as a guideline or benchmark in a precautionary manner, kind of thing.
Oh, definitely.
It's good that you talk about like backup plans and whatnot, and you mentioned that they're asking for certain informations, both from a compliance regulation, but also the insurances. Can you talk a bit more about what should a backup plan entail, and what does a good backup plan or backup and disaster recovery plan actually look like?
just to preempt that, I think it's the backup and disaster. Yeah, the disaster recovery part is the more important part. Is the ability to recover, and that's where I think a big part of it is showing or being able to prove that you've tested the plan and that the plan does work. It's no longer just acceptable to only have a plan.
Well, and you also have to think about, some of these rules and regulations and compliancy things that are out there. You have to, excuse me, demonstrate that you can pull data or recover data within a certain amount of time and of a certain amount of length. So in some of our medical dental industry stuff, they have to show that they can actually recover that data and produce that data, even if they've been hit by ransomware or what have you, or down. They still have to abide by those rules to be able to provide that data.
Awesome. I would also be interested in hearing from our audience again. I have one more poll for you where we would like to know, do you have a documented backup or disaster recovery plan? And since we have attendance from resellers and from managed service providers, as well as from companies and IT departments from companies, so that's why the question is phrased like to address both. But do you, on the call, do you have a documented backup and disaster recovery plan? Do you have it for all your customers, for your entire environment? Or do you have it for most of your customers, majority of your environment? Or do you not have a documented backup plan at all? Well, I sure hope we don't have too many no's here. What do you think? Do you think, Nate and Mike, that generally companies, managed service providers, et cetera, are prepared and have a documented plan in place?
Nate's a little closer to that, but what I will say is I've seen where there is a disaster recovery or business continuity or backup plan in place, but it's not necessarily put across the organization. So it's just with the IT people. They're the only ones aware of it. Anybody else in the organization doesn't really know.
Yeah, I would say that that's very true. And I mean, we had an interesting thing with a partner. I guess it was last week or 2 weeks ago. Oh, it was 2 weeks ago, where they had a business. They were servicing a business, and the whole saying in IT, what happens if you get hit by a bus? Well, the owner of that company did get hit by a bus, a literal bus, and they were trying to kind of sort everything out and get everything situated, and they didn't have a good grasp of what was going on, what was going where, because that person had kept everything kind of close to their chest because they didn't want to have everyone else messing with it. And stuff like that does happen. It's not just in the books.
Also, it's a moving target. Things change so fast. Yeah, I mean, just all the rules, the regulations, what you need to have done, and it's people have jobs. They have to they have to keep the company running and staying on top of all these plans and different compliance issues and regulations and things like that. It's a challenge, I believe, to keep it up to date.
Well, keeping it up to date is probably the hardest thing, because think of how many things, I mean, even just us as NovaBACKUP, we add and do and change and use different services, do different things. That all has to be accounted for in this. And if we're just looking internally, that's a lot of stuff. But then when you're talking about an MSP or partner that's trying to help manage multiple users and companies and stuff like that, it goes exponentially even harder.
Yeah, and I see things like there's a bullet point here about the end of life of the server 2012 and that. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, that's a big one. It feels like we just got rid of hopefully get rid of Windows 7 and Server 2008 and 2008 R2, and now we have 2012 and 2012 R2 that is just around the corner in October.
What percent of our customers do you think, just a guess, that might be using that server?
Oh, I mean, heck, we even have Server 2012 R2 machines in our stuff. I would say at least half, if not more.
Yeah.
It's going to be a painful year. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, and if you're talking things like insurance coverage and things like that, if your operating system is not supported, I mean, you're probably not going to get coverage either.
they're not going to pay anything for it. They'll be like, hey, this is no longer supported by Microsoft. There's no security updates. You're out of luck. You've breached our contract. Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing the insights on compliance and insurance and how you can stay, on top of things. And I think that staying on top of things is a great segue into the second topic that we wanted to talk a little bit more about, the second trend that we're seeing. We're talking about those compliance requirements and things that are just getting more and more complicated. I mean, it's not just compliance, it's technology. Think artificial intelligence. I mean, that is a black box on its own there. But also, more complex software, more complex hardware, more complex businesses. So what we're seeing is kind of a move towards simplicity. So even if you go outside of the technology area in the last years, more and more people love to grow their own food. Like there's a whole movement on, greenhouses, having a greenhouse in your backyard or having a little lot where you can grow your food, etc., just living more sustainably. And that, translates back into the technology sector as well. So we've been hearing things about, using simpler technologies that only do what they're supposed to, streamlining your business in general. What are your thoughts on that? Like, what do you hear from our customers and partners in regards to, being focused and simplifying the business?
First off, I just like to add from our experience in the software world, and that is simplicity and optimization is not simple. It takes a lot of work for the technical teams to make life easier for the end users. And on top of all that, we're kind of in this perfect storm with the complexity of hybrid work environments and the increased volume and sophistication of cyber attacks. So, simplicity is from an executive standpoint, that's the word we like to use. It's simple. Let's do this, but it really to make it happen is another level altogether. But we do see that companies are definitely trying to move their businesses towards simpler solutions anyway.
Yeah, I would say we're seeing more people focusing on what they're doing, what they can do well. You know what I mean? Focusing on their main, like, we're a backup company. We focus on backup. And everything else we try to take care of, like outsource. Like we don't run our own Exchange server. We're not that company that is going to run our own Exchange server. We're going to use Microsoft 365 for that. Just getting that out of even internal IT hands, relieves and simplifies some things. And we're seeing, that more and more with especially MSPs and partners, that they're focusing on, one type of customer and basically making, the entire stack, the software stack, hardware stack, whatever you want to call it, the same across all of them, so it's easier to deal with. I think that's one of the big things that we've seen over the last, last couple of years, especially with COVID and everything else, and now it's still getting hammered in right now too.
Yeah, definitely working with specialists in their fields is kind of like an outsourcing kind of thing. And the challenges on small businesses, especially, which is a lot of our customer base, they're fighting for the employees. You got such record low unemployment rates, and even though you're hearing of the mass layoffs in the big corporations, sometimes that's just cleaning house, taking advantage of the situation. And you never see the goose that lays the golden egg being out on the market too often. And so there's a talent shortage, there's price increases and inflation, all these different things that are getting into making it so a company it makes it very difficult for them to be experts on everything. As we even showed in compliance, it's like an alphabet soup. How do you stay on top of all that? It's hard to do, and just going outside to get that expert advice, is very very important and recommended by us. And we have several managed service provider partners that are heavily in the vertical fields, as Nate mentioned, who are specialists in those fields, and they're actually our most successful partners. And those are the ones that we recommend to our corporate customers, and that maybe they talk to, because it gets beyond everybody's level at some point.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's making sure it's not the jack of all trades anymore. It's more of specialized in what you do best is I think the best way to go. Whether it's software, hardware, what have you.
And I think one other thing that fits nicely into that is, I have that back to normal in quotation marks in there. When you think about like 3 years ago and before, people worked in an office. Like that was kind of the general norm. Then we had 2-3 years of working from home. And
Sure.
now people are saying, oh yeah, we're back to normal now, right? It's kind of like business as usual, but it really isn't if you think about it, right? Because offices are not quite open yet.
Yeah.
People are still working from home.
Yeah, what is normal?
Right.
What is normal? I think it's a very confusing topic. I mean, our office is a perfect example. I mean, we have employees all over the U.S. We do have a central office that a core of our company works from, but we also have work from home days and come to the office days. And you see companies that have stated publicly, like a major CRM company that starts with the letter S, they have basically stated that their whole policy was to allow all employees to work from home. And now I'm seeing that they have my friends in the industry that I know who work there are being told you need to get into the office. And some of these people live like a 3-4 hour drive away from the office now because they've changed their lifestyle and moved kind of more out to the suburbs. So yeah, it's definitely normal is not so normal, but that's what makes it also challenging.
Yeah, and when everyone was in the office, that's one thing to take care of and protect and deal with. And then when everyone is work from home, that's another thing that you have just a specific target for. But now I would say a majority are this hybrid mix of employees that are working pretty much anywhere, and the threats are everywhere then. The threats are in the office, they're outside the office, it's wherever that employee is at and that type of thing. And we're seeing some interesting things with some of the new, I'll call it new tech for security software. If you look at say I'll say Huntress and other people, they the reason those type of products are really working well, and instead of the, I'll call it the traditional AV antivirus thing, is because it's not just a traditional antivirus anymore or a traditional security suite. It's looking at everything. But you have the security thing, then you have where's their data at? Is their data all central, all on the cloud, all on the local laptop, and having to protect and deal with that in order to make sure that you're compliant for some of these things, that becomes very, very difficult. So I think that's a big challenge that this has really kind of brought on, our partners, MSPs, anyone in the IT industry now.
Well, I also see where you're saying like where's our data at, and I see a lot of companies trying to centralize or get cloud-based applications to run their businesses from, like the CRMs that we have, or different tools and that, and even having cloud backup more in our space, but cloud isn't the only answer. And then when you have all these people all over the place, and what have you experienced with that, Nate?
Yeah, I mean, you talk about people moving to cloud, and people, some of these large organizations that have moved everything to cloud are realizing maybe having everything in cloud is not the best, most economical way to deal with things, because that also, besides just how much it's costing them to put everything in cloud, it also introduces a whole host of other entry points for attackers, ransomware, and compliance headaches. Again, we go back to the compliance. Make it, anything that you have in the cloud, you have to take care of that compliance issue too. So that's one thing, and then you have to think about, how do I control my data? How do I back up my data? What happens if, hey, yesterday we had a large Office 365 downtime. What happened if maybe someone's OneDrive didn't come back after that, or what have you? There's a lot of things that you have to take care of when you're looking at where that data's at.
Yeah, in the backup space too. That's why we have this application-specific backup, is where we're looking to. You can't just depend on having access to your data in the cloud anymore, and a lot of people want to pull their data locally, and they also want to maybe put it to alternate cloud locations as well.
Exactly. They need to know where that's at in case something does happen, because it will happen.
Yeah, and I think when we're talking about trends here, I think you have your core applications where they have backups for, like Microsoft 365, or I'm seeing Salesforce or QuickBooks and all that. But I see the trend continuing to even drive down further into more industry-specific vertical applications, because that data is so critical for a business to keep their doors open, and that's where you talk about, say, like we do well in the healthcare industry, or like a practice management application where a lot of them are becoming cloud-based. But what happens if you lose internet connection? You just don't have access to that data, and that's the work from home and all that stuff. It really adds an extra layer of complexity too.
Well, and you also have to think about what you might have known where most of that data is on that practice management product, or whatever product it might be. But what if some update comes in and now they're storing something somewhere else? You need to make sure that you're taking care of all that. So that also goes to that whole things are changing so quickly,
Yeah,
that you can't keep up.
and then there's always when you have that hybrid kind of environment, separating work from personal. It's one thing to tell people they can't put personal information on their systems, but if it's in their home all the time, it's very difficult to. It's easy to have maybe a good work-life balance, but it might not be recommended on our systems.
It's interesting you brought this up, because I was just reading something. Well, actually, a couple times over this last week, some people had gotten, they're working from home and using their own personal laptops and stuff like that. But the corporate IT had actually put like a security software on it, and all of a sudden they can't even use their laptop, their personal laptop, for what they would normally do at home. So it's one of those things where that whole commingling thing really adds complexity.
Yeah, that can be a mess. So,
Awesome.
yeah.
Well, thanks, Mike. Thanks, Nate, for sharing your examples here and your experience on what you hear from our customers and partners. Before we get to the questions, so attendees, now is your time to put in your questions in the questions section. Say that 3 times fast. I wanted to just take a quick second to tell you a little bit about NovaBACKUP, about who we are. And as you've heard Mike and Nate talk about, we talked a lot about data protection. So yeah, we are backup and restore software, and we are focusing on reliable data protection. Over the years that we've been in business, we've collected a lot of best practices that we are utilizing to protect your data locally and in the cloud. And some of those best practices are used in, Mike just mentioned it, in highly regulated industries like healthcare. So just think about HIPAA as an example, what the requirements are when it comes to protecting that data. So we are working with a lot of customers and partners in that industry. And it's not just that we're good at that, I'm saying that completely unbiased, of course, but it's also that we have experts as colleagues. Like the people we employ are experts in their field. As an example, our support staff has been with us an average of 10 years or more. So we have a lot of experience in the data protection industry, but also generally just when it comes to IT. And something that we're very proud of is that we are helping you, our partners and customers, on eye level, meaning you don't have to go through that support script for another hour or something. You can talk to someone and they help you really solve your issue. So as a thank you for joining us here, we uploaded that in the handout section, as I mentioned earlier, our compliance checklist. And then you're also free to schedule a meeting with us, especially those 30% that in the earlier poll said that they don't have a backup plan in place. Feel free to talk to us. We're happy to help you with that. But also, if you just want to see a demo or want to test the solution yourself, feel free to reach out to us, and that either to our partners at NovaBACKUP.com email address, or you can also reach out directly to us, to Mike, Nate, or myself, if you want to talk directly with us.
Yeah.
Yeah,
a
sorry,
little, a
Mike.
little, a little further on that. It was like we do offer health checks to our customers, but also to our non-customers, and we're happy. Obviously, our goal is to maybe win your business someday. But even if you need help or some advice on that, feel free to reach out. It doesn't just have to be someone who's a paying customer for us.
Awesome, thanks, Mike. All right, I see questions coming in, so feel free to continue that. We have a handful of minutes left before the end of this webinar to take care of your questions. Again, if we run out of time, we will get back to you via email or phone, so just submit away. Nate, I see there are a couple of questions coming in. Which one do you want to
There are. It's some really good questions actually too. So one of the questions is, how does our software NovaBACKUP fit in compared to a couple other competitors, specifically when they're talking about audit reporting and some other things for compliance? Great question. So I don't know specifics about how some of the other things competitors work on specific audit reporting, but I can say with the NovaBACKUP product, we actually put in some I'll call it reports and other things, and we're actually adding some more too. But those reports are being used for like say I want a monthly report or what have you of all of the backups and restores and other things that is built into the software itself. We have talked with insurance companies that because we actually had some MSPs come to us and say, hey, they're asking, our insurance company is asking for this. Do you have anything that works for this? And we showed them the reporting that's already in the software that they had, and it worked perfectly for the insurance company. And also with our central management console, that reporting is also something that they were using for this in exporting how that is working. But we are adding some more things to that. But that's kind of the answer on how NovaBACKUP does that today. The other question was
sorry, Nate, a quick note to that too is that that we have put out our newest release in October of 2022, but we've also switched to how we're developing the product and that, and we're coming out with a lot more of these features much quicker now as well. So you'll be seeing our roadmap is quite exciting and where we're heading, and I think a lot of these things will be covered as well.
Oh, 100%, especially on the reporting side for our central management. That is getting constantly updated, and that's where we're putting a lot of focus, especially on this type of thing. Speaking of central management and cloud, the question is, can you confirm if all your cloud servers are in the USA? And if not, does the USA client data stay in the USA? So this is a great question. So we have 3 locations right now. We have one in the USA, one in Canada, and one in Germany for our cloud destinations. So if you are an MSP partner or someone backing up to our USA cloud, all of your data is staying in the US. Same thing if you're going into Canada. Canada has some pretty stringent regulations up there too, that it has to stay in Canada. And then we get over to the EU and in Germany. That's even more stringent. So yes, depending on where you are and where you want the data to store between those 3 locations, your data is always staying in that region. Yes. Question. S3 compliance and that type of thing. Question is if they could use other cloud devices such as Backblaze, Wasabi, or even MinIO. With the latest version 20.0, we can certainly support any standard S3 object storage. So if you want to bring up your own S3 storage or use one of the public S3 compatible storage locations, you can certainly use that. Okay, that's a lot of the questions. There's a couple specific questions that I'll probably answer just via email because they're very specific to what some people are asking here. Mike, did you have anything else that you wanted to go through or
Yeah, no,
explanations?
I think we covered everything. I obviously have lots of data, lots of information to discuss, but we kind of used up our time, I believe.
Ooh, yeah.
Yeah. So I think we could pretty much drop it off there. I mean, I have some interesting statistics I could share potentially, but beyond that, I think we're good.
Let's save those for the next webinar then.
Yeah, there's some other interesting questions coming in, but I'll respond directly to you guys as those are coming in, so that's fine.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Mike and Nate, for sharing your experience with us and for spending the time with us. Attendees, thank you so much for joining us, and thanks for your comments and for your questions. Again, if you have any further questions or just want to talk with us about what we just mentioned, the topics we talked about, reach out to us. Let us know, what your thoughts are on those trends. And then we'll hope we see you on the next webinar. And until then, have a great afternoon, a great day. Talk to you soon.
Thank you.